Hello, BookTube, and welcome to ShakeTube 2017. This is an informal read-along of Shakespeare plays that's lasting till the first week in December, hosted by Lukash and Curtis, in which we read a Shakespeare play every week and just make a reaction video about it, your thoughts, that sort of thing. Uh, Very informal, no jumping on or jumping off point, so feel free to join at any time if you haven't already. But this week, this week we do Hamlet, the most famous play by the most famous playwright of all time, um, which really needs no introduction, right? I'm assuming plot-wise, even if you haven't read it, there are quite a few people involved with ShakeTube who haven't read it. I'm assuming you'll still know the basic story: a young prince whose father has died, and his mother has married his uncle with unseemly haste. And when young Prince Hamlet confronts the ghost of old King Hamlet, he's informed that his father was murdered by his brother and ordered to revenge, to take revenge. Which, when you put it like that, sounds very simple. Sounds like a simple plot. Hamlet gets that instruction from his dead father, and the next thing he will do is kill his uncle. He's instructed not to kill his mother, leave her to heaven. uh, but the play becomes a gigantic, prolonged, and we don't actually know how long. There are two different versions. They're very different. There's all sorts of indications of an earlier version that we don't have, that may have been very different still. But the play becomes a gigantic monument to indecision. It becomes a gigantic monument to that consummation not happening. uh, First, Hamlet doubts whether or not the ghost is telling the truth, because these things can be apparitions from the devil as well. He's uh, mollified by considering the effects on his mother. He's mollified by considering the effects on the kingdom. He's stopped in his plan when he's about to kill his uncle, when he encounters his uncle alone, but his uncle is at that moment praying. And Hamlet wonders, well, if I kill him with prayers on his lips, I want to go straight to heaven. And so on and so forth. Uh, and when you read it like that, especially if you're reading it for the first time, I wonder if first time readers won't wonder what the fuss is about. This isn't like a lot of Shakespeare tragedies where there's a lot of shot and incident and where the narrative through line is clear. Instead, it's not just plot wise, but also emotionally an unbelievable muddle. A muddle that should ruin it as a play. As Anthony Burgess puts it, it's a tragedy without a catharsis. And yet it doesn't ruin it as a play. There is no steady increase. There is no organic, steady increase in dramatic tension the way you get in, say, Romeo and Juliet. So the play should fail, and yet we know that it doesn't, because it's a huge success in countries with audiences who've never read it in English and never will. It's a huge success when it's done without words. It's a huge success, period. It's something about it works. Uh, I myself have watched it a million times in a million adaptations. I've lost count of how many times I've seen it on the stage, and I don't know what that something is. I have no idea. There's a silly pirate plot that's tacked on in the middle. There are innumerable internal contradictions in the plot itself, and the ending of the play is almost funny. It almost seems like Shakespeare is going for tongue-in-cheek comedy, where in the very last part of the very last act of the play, he just punts the whole thing in a way that he himself almost never does anywhere else, and that is usually the kind of thing we associate with third-rate dramatists. All that happens in Hamlet. But what also happens in Hamlet is unbelievably powerful writing. Just writing that goes right to the heart of uh, what it is to be human. Because uh, unlike a lot of other tragedies, Hamlet deals with us, with our daily life. Yes, it's a prince and it's a kingdom, and there's high matters of state, but the play is about uh, an unbelievable burden of action placed on a young man who doesn't have the nature for it. As simple as that. Where you life presents you with an obligation that you don't want to fulfill, plain and simple. Whereas uh, in the other tragedies, that's not true. In the other tragedies, people are working directly towards their ends, and the ends are just in conflict, either with reality or with each other. Hamlet shares one thing in common with almost all of Shakespeare's tragic heroes, which is that he himself is completely unlikable. You wouldn't want to know him. You wouldn't want to be his friend. There's no explanation, no reasonable explanation anyway, in the play why Horatio is his friend. And the same thing is true with all the other tragic heroes that we've met so far and that we will meet. They're not nice people. But with Hamlet, he's not a violent person. Yes, he commits violence all throughout the play, but he sort of bumbles into it one way or another. It's a mystery play in a deep sense. In a deep sense, it owes more to the medieval theatrical world than it does to the Renaissance world that Shakespeare was leading. Because I don't believe that its magic is plumbable. I have seen staged versions of improvements of Hamlet where the writer decides to fix the play, and they don't work. The magic is gone right from the beginning. But when you read Shakespeare's play, it's unbelievably gripping from beginning to end, and it shouldn't be. And I read it again for ShakeTube 2017, and the main reaction that I had was the size of it, how big it seems, even at the times in the play when very little is happening, there's an expansiveness to the rhetoric that is just enormous. It's bigger than anything else except for another play we're going to be reading. They reminded me of Kenneth Branagh's 1996, his great 1996 comedy, A Midwinter's Tale, which you must see if you haven't already, about a haphazard group of theatricals putting on a performance of Hamlet. And when they're talking about it ahead of time and doing read-throughs of the script, at one point one of them sits back and says, "Oh, I get it. Hamlet is Bosnia." It certainly feels that way, and I loved it. I loved reading it again. But I think my favorite part of ShakeTube 2017 this time around is going to be watching the videos of other people, especially people who are unfamiliar with the play or who are only reading it for the first time. That is amazing to me. So I'm definitely wanting to know what you think. And I believe we do another high tragedy next time around. But for now, that's all I have to say about Hamlet. One of the things about this play that induces almost crippling self-consciousness, even in an old blowhard like me, is the rock-solid assurance that you have ahead of time that you can't say anything original about Hamlet. It has been the subject of more writing than virtually any other piece of literature in the history of the world. So you'll talk about Hamlet's indecision, you'll talk about the great stagecraft and the great verbiage, and then you'll shuffle off stage left. but do that on camera, because I want to know what you all think of this thing, this weird, inconclusive masterpiece. And we'll all gather again together next time for I confess off the top of my head, I don't know what it is. It's another tragedy, I believe. But you can expect a longer video then, when it's slightly less trod ground. But in the meantime, I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.